The ESG, these are the standards this is all part of the green stuff. The green movement is nothing more but a proxy war between statism and liberty. It just is behind the veneer of green energy. That's all it is. It's a proxy battle. So the ESG, this is just another aspect of the green agenda. And that's the extremely stupid grift, environmental study grifting guidelines, something. I know what it is. I'm just not going to do it. So here's the thing. For Janet Yellen to say this, fossil fuels are, you can't, they're low cost. They are replenishable. Solar and wind, they're unreliable. I mean, do you know that and this is, let me pull up my source for this, that China and India, apparently, they have a ton of coal plants actually in development. Alex Epstein wrote a big thing on this. And he covers the parts of, he was looking at China and India and ESG divestment. It's true. I mean, this whole thing was something that people at the United Nations came up with as a way to try to subjugate all of these nations into bending the knee to this. It's become a top priority now, and we're seeing it in financial institutions. Where you have banks that are actually being encouraged to evaluate businesses on their ESG standards and all this stuff. It's very, very, very Beijing, CCP. And, you should do investing in environmental norms and all of this stuff. And they want every company to fall under the yoke of this ESG stuff. And like I said, it was really like created within the UN from these green devotees. This wind and solar are not as reliable. And there's no way you're going to be able to entirely ever separate solar, or even, we were talking about the hydrogen batteries in that air, like actually taking thin air and making it into energy. Isn't that what they did with Fallout, by the way? Oh, yeah. Isn't that how that? Yeah. I just realized that. Yeah, that's actually fun. They had the hydrogen battery packs and all that. Huh. So they were first, huh? No, interesting. So you have to be able to have oil and gas. And first off, how are you going to create all this new infrastructure based on, wind and solar without oil and gas? That's also interesting. And you have to have oil and gas as a backup. I mean, that's just it. This whole thing, and I linked for you a big piece that Epstein wrote in a previous newsletter. Alex Epstein, not that Epstein. And how dangerous this movement is to the world, because it's almost like this was designed to make China energy dominant. And this is a national security issue, because energy is national security. Energy is safety. I mean, if you have someone who can control your use and access to energy in the same way that you're watching Russia with their Nord Stream 1, or sorry, as Corinne Jean-Pierre says, Nord Stream, or Nordstrom. I can't even say it incorrectly. Her Nordstrom pipeline to Europe, that's a huge issue. And all of these renewable materials, and we've talked about this. Oh my gosh, this is like a passion subject for me. All of these renewable materials that are for use either in Biden's green energy stuff, which he has in his tax bill that he passed, all of this, it's clearly dominated from China. They dominate the mining, the processing, the manufacturing, all of it. And why is that? Because of regulations that are based in greenery. See, they have no environmental protections, although they keep acting like they're changing it, but they aren't. They have no worker protections. They have nothing like this. We won't even, and this is what gets me, for all of our talk, and by ours, I mean the left's talk about solar and wind and everything, all this other stuff, they don't put anything into the excavation, the sourcing, the processing of it, the refinement of it here domestically. They don't, whenever they talk about infrastructure, that is never included in any of their, when they're throwing out money like they're at the strip club. That these things never get any of it. That's and that to me, that is where I think that they're completely fake. They have no problem leaning totally on China. They don't want to give any of this money to create any of this here within the United States. And as Kane notes, you bring up a good point. Because you're like, well, worker protections would drive the cost of batteries and that through the roof. It would. And that's where I think some, like I don't mind private sector unions at all. Public sector unions are what I'm entirely against because I'm a taxpayer and I have no representation. And our ancestors went to war over that. But the one problem that I have with some of this stuff is that you have worker protections and you have, I can't see how they wouldn't in a rare earth element mine unionize. But you also have to be realistic and look at what the market's asking. Market dictates all of this stuff. And I don't know, there are a lot of questions to ask about this, but the ESG, when I hear Janet Yellen talk about all of this, they are ignoring the fact that energy is national security. Look at California. They're wanting to ban the sale of gas-powered vehicles within the next 10 years. They're already having a major problem on their grid. All the EVs that are out there right now are what? They're electric. EVs, electric vehicles, which the electricity is produced nationally and I think it's over 86% of it in coal-fired plants. But the issue is that they don't even have a grid that can sustain what they're demanding. They don't. And they're bankrupt, basically, aren't they? Are they not? Aren't they in the red? Where are they going to get the money to... See, they think that they can rob Peter to pay Paul. They want to bankrupt oil and gas, and they think that they can sin tax everything to death. And then they think that they're going to take that money. Oh, then we'll do this on the... When does that ever happen, by the way? When have they ever taken money from something and actually funded something else that they claimed they were going to fund? That's never happened. Furthermore, why should that industry be forced to subsidize that industry? If it's attractive, private investment will come. This is the government trying to force speed the issue. And that makes it dangerous and unreliable. I mean, there's one thing, having your pet project is one thing, but virtue signaling our country into being vulnerable is another entirely.